Well, the Miami Heat beat the Cleveland Cavaliers 140-138 in overtime in an absolute thriller. Donovan Spider Mitchell for the game had a monster one, 28 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists, which included, by the way, the game-tying three-pointer in overtime with just 4/10 of a second remaining. And at that point, it should have been an absolute slam dunk lock of a double overtime coming, but not so fast because the Cleveland Cavaliers, in what can only be described as one of the greatest defensive meltdowns ever, gave up a dunk buzzer beating lob to Andrew Wiggins with, again, only 4/10 of a second remaining on the clock. And you couldn't even get a shot off in 4/10 of a second. A couple of years ago, there was a rule change years ago, which indicated with 4/10 of a second, you could get like a tip, like a lob, like a catch and lob or something like that. Of course, the most famous 4/10 of a second shot made was the famed Derek Fisher 4/10 shot buzzer beater against the San Antonio Spurs in what was just an epic, thrilling playoff game between those two. And if you forgot that game, Kobe Bryant hit what looked to be the game winner with around 12 seconds remaining, only to have Tim Duncan come down the other end and pull one out of his ass with Shaquille O'Neal's arm buried in his face. It looked like the Spurs were going to absolutely steal one there, but D. Fish, who was a southpaw, he had that little running hook catch and left-hand heave to beat the buzzer with 4/10. That was the most famous 4/10 of a second make, but that one was at least decently defended by San Antonio. What is the defensive strategy here by the Cleveland Cavaliers? Obviously, a complete meltdown, some kind of miscommunication here, as it looked like Moses parting the Red Seas of the Cavaliers defense to allow Wiggins to run into the rim uncontested and catch that game winner. And look, I understand that we're talking semantics here. When I label this video the worst shot you will ever see, it's probably one of the best shots you'd ever see if you're a Miami Heat fan, but I'm looking at it through the lens of the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavaliers who are just so utterly unserious. How do you justify losing this game? The Cavaliers who last year, everyone forgets, amid the historic run that the Oklahoma City Thunder had, the Thunder who set the all-time NBA record for differential and for SRS. But the Cleveland Cavaliers actually were the second best team in the NBA last year by a pretty large margin. They were second in simple rating system behind only the record-setting Oklahoma City Thunder, and they won 64 games a year ago. They had an easy run of it through the Eastern Conference first round matchup, which was these Miami Heat. This game, in fact, was the first meeting since the final in that series a year ago in the playoffs. It was a 4-0 sweeping, if you forgot about that, and it was the biggest margin of differential in NBA history for a swept series. 122-point margin differential for Cleveland over Miami in the first round last season. That's about 30 points per game on average that the Cavaliers beat their ass in that first round, and it culminated with a Game 4 sweeping. And try this final score on for size: 138-83.
That's outrageous.
For those of you who aren't great at simple mathematics, that is a 55-point spread in an elimination game at home to be swept out of the playoffs. And lo and behold, here we go in the first meeting, a rematch. The Heat win it, and the Cavaliers give up that shot to lose it. And now the Cavaliers are, just bunched in with the rest of the group there in the top 5-6 seed lines in the Eastern Conference in a season where, look, the Cavaliers should be out for retribution after the way they gagged and vomited all over themselves in the second round of the playoffs last year after they got by the Heat. So they sweep the Heat in historic fashion. After being the second best team in the NBA all season long, they get into the second round against the Indiana Pacers, drop game 1, and then have a colossal meltdown in game 2 at home.
It's a complete crap.
And if you forgot about that one, again, allow me to jog your memory. They were up by 7 points with 47 seconds remaining in the fourth quarter and end up getting stunned by the Pacers 120 to 119 to go into that 0-2 hole on the way to being beaten in 5 games in the second round. Again, this season is the season to make it all right. It's the season for vengeance, to get back here in an Eastern Conference that is absolutely wide open. In fact, I keep saying that, but the East isn't wide open. It should be a runaway for the Cleveland Cavaliers, but they're just such an unserious team. They keep doing these things, losing these games, and I can't believe they are a viable or real competitor until they start finding a way to finish these games off. Absolutely disgraceful. In fact, luckily for Atkinson, head coach of Cleveland, he had been ejected in this game, so he was in the locker room, because I would suggest that this is a fireable offense for anyone that was calling the shots from the sideline that did not stress the fact that you need to clog the lane. Just keep people underneath the basket. You don't really even need to guard anywhere else on the floor with 0.4 of a second left. Literally a running catch heave or a catch alley-oop dunk are literally the only things that can beat you. So just go ahead and put all of your players, stack them underneath the basket, and just allow an inbound like 25 feet out for a little catch heave. It ain't going to go in. You go to double overtime. Instead, nobody left underneath, and the game is over. And this game likely will haunt Cleveland. When you look at the standings right now, there is, like I said, a bit of a bunching there up at the top. The Detroit Pistons actually are still leading the Eastern Conference. They're the 1 seed, the standalone at 9-2. Cade Cunningham, speaking of Detroit, had a monstrous game last night, a 45-point triple-double with 5 steals. He joins Michael Jordan as the only player in NBA history to accomplish that such stat line, though he also missed 31 shots in the process.
What?
Yes, do not adjust your phones or laptops or TVs or whatever devices you might be listening to. You heard that right. 14 of 45 from the field for Cade Cunningham, but his Pistons get the win in overtime and retain solo possession of first place in the Eastern Conference. Again, 9-2. No one would have thought that, so great season for the Detroit Pistons. And the Cavaliers, meanwhile, look, they just dropped to 6-4 on the season, and they are essentially in like a 4-way tie from 3 through 7 at this point. So bunched up, and the Cavaliers, again, just not a viable competitor. The Heat, by the way, they just continue to overachieve as well. And if anyone doubts the greatness of Erik Spoelstra, you should. I don't know who would be doubting it at this stage after everything that he's done with the lineups that he has had by and large throughout his tenure after the LeBron, Dwayne Wade team broke apart. And this year, Spoelstra has just been playing without presumptively his best player, Tyler Hero. Last night, they were without Bam Adebayo, and no big deal. They still get the win, again, 140 to 138 against the Cavaliers in overtime. And the Heat moved to 5-0 at home for only the second time in their franchise's history, joining the 2012-2013 team that won the NBA championship and the 2019-2020 team, which ultimately lost in the NBA championship series. So great job by the legendary Erik Spoelstra this season, who is one of the very best in the business, an absolute bona fide Hall of Fame coach. And if you remember, LeBron James didn't want that guy. He tried getting him fired. He went to Pat Riley. Again, this according to Riley himself. LeBron was petitioning to get Erik Spoelstra fired because that is just what LeBron James does, the all-time coach killer that King James is. And everybody who whines and complains about how LeBron doesn't have any good coaches, that's because LeBron is uncoachable. and he just wants to get any good coach he does have fired. But I digress. Great win for the Miami Heat. Great shot designed by Spoelstra and Wiggins, I suppose. So it's actually great shot if you're a Heat fan. But again, I'm looking at this through the lens of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it's an absolute pathetic defensive breakdown, abysmal. If I was Atkinson, I would have just fired whoever was in charge on the sideline for that final play when they got in to the locker room after the game. So we'll have to see what the Cleveland Cavaliers can do to rebound. But guys, many thanks as always for stopping in with me. Please do make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on to stay up to date with more from me. Until next time, guys.